this video, I will discuss why the AMG M156 engine is one of AMG's best known engines, loved by enthusiasts around the world, and I'll discuss where it had some shortcomings. The M156 powered many AMG cars under the 6.3 liter badge, from the C63 and the E63 to the S63 and the SL63. The M156 was available in pretty much every model in the AMG range outside of the SLK and the G-Class. And for a time, it was the most powerful naturally aspirated V8 engine available. I will start by going over the history and development of the M156 and the different versions of this engine. I will also later discuss some of the issues that arose, especially with some of the earlier model years of this engine. Finally, I will then discuss the M159 in the SLS AMG, which is based on the M156. The M156 was a very important engine for AMG. With the previous success of the M113K 5.5 V8 compressor engine bringing the brand a lot of recognition, expectations were very high. The M156 was the first time that AMG had actually developed an engine from the ground up rather than take a Mercedes designed engine and modify it as they had always done before. AMG really wanted to create a sophisticated power plant with the latest racing technology taken from their AMG race cars. Starting with the aluminum engine block, AMG opted for a much stronger closed deck design derived from AMG racing engines. The closed deck block is stronger than that of the M113K engine that came before it. The M156 was much more of a race-bred engine. In fact, a closed deck design was previously used in the SLR McLaren supercar. The M156 was the first mass-produced engine to feature a twin wire arc sprayed coating on the cylinder walls to reduce friction and increase strength. The incredibly fine finish that results is both incredibly thin and almost perfectly smooth with a mirror-like finish. The M156 featured a forged steel alloy crankshaft, which was based on a racing design, as were the forged steel connecting rods. The standard M156 engines featured cast hyper-eutectic pistons. The aluminum cylinder heads of the M156 featured 4 valves per cylinder. Twin overhead camshafts in each cylinder bank opened the 32 valves via bucket-type followers, which were developed in AMG racing engines. The space-saving design of the bucket-type followers permits a stiff valve train and therefore high engine speeds with large valve opening cross-sections, which in turn increases output and torque. The compression ratio is 11.3 to 1 in all versions of this engine. The M156 also went back to 1 spark plug per cylinder as opposed to the 2 per cylinder of its M113K predecessor. With the M156, AMG brought in variable valve timing for both the intake and exhaust valves with electro-hydraulic cam adjusters. It also featured a variable length intake manifold with dual 74mm throttle bodies. The M156 had a capacity of 6.2 liters. The engine was marketed as a 6.3 to commemorate the Mercedes M100 engine, which initially displaced 6.3 liters. Finally, with the M156, as other AMG engines are, a single technician assembles the complete engine by hand according to the one man, one engine philosophy of AMG. The M156 test mules were repurposed CLK DTM race cars, and testing ran through 2004 and 2005. These test cars later made appearances during the release of the subsequent cars featuring this engine at auto shows in 2005 and on. The M156 was first made available in the W212 E63 AMG, and then it spread across the range. The M156 was awarded Performance Engine of the Year for 2009 and 2010 by Engine Technology International magazine. For 2010, AMG introduced the P31 performance package in the C63, which was an important thing for this engine. This meant that the cast pistons were upgraded to stronger forged pistons. The connecting rods were also strengthened and the crankshaft was lightened. The P31 changes were carried over to all other top C63 models such as the Black Series and the 507 edition. These special C63s were the only M156 cars to get forged pistons. The upgraded internals were taken from the SLS M159 engine, which will be discussed later in this video. For the US market, M156 engine cars are equipped with a mass airflow sensor housing that has a more restrictive profile compared to M156 engines that were sold outside of the US. For the 2012 model year, AMG switched to plastic valve covers. The performance of the M156 engine was class leading at the time. It produced up to 518 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque in the SL63 AMG. The engine itself weighed only 202 kilograms, which was very light for such a large V8 engine. The M156 could rev up to 7,200 RPM. AMG detuned the engine the further it went down in the range, all the way down to the standard C63 with 451 horsepower. When it comes to modifying this engine, while long tube headers and a good tune can get the M156 well over 550 horsepower, the engine still has plenty of potential because of its strong design. The closed deck engine block and the forged internals available in many of the C63s make this engine ideal for aftermarket supercharging. Now I will discuss some of the issues that came up with the M156. Early M156 cars have multiple problems with their cylinder heads. The most notorious issue is the cylinder head bolts, which can in some cases snap from corrosion. What this will do is push the cylinder head off the block slightly and create a gap where coolant can come into the cylinder and potentially lock up the engine. There is a cutoff point determining which engines have good head bolts and which engines have bad head bolts. All engines before the engine cutoff number 60658 are affected with bad head bolts, and this went partly into early 2011 model year builds. You can find your engine number with any online Vindicoder. What we see here is this 2011 E63 does not have bad head bolts because it's past the cutoff number, but what we see is this 2010 C63 is part of the affected cars. Mercedes issued a new part number on the bolts with a stronger design and began installing them in new cars partway through the 2011 model year. Once this was changed, the engines really didn't seem to have any more problems with their head bolts. The next most notorious issue with the M156 is premature wear in the cylinder heads. The M156 valve lifter buckets, otherwise known as tappets or followers, started to wear out the camshaft in some cases. The lifters are supposed to spin in correct operation while the camshafts ride over them, and if they seize, they can wear out the cams prematurely. And now because the cam buckets are made from steel and the cams are made from softer iron, the cams can wear out over time, even if the buckets are spinning correctly. Particularly, the intake cams, which sit physically higher in the engine, can wear prematurely. Because these engines have flat tappet lifters rather than a more widely used roller type, changing the oil regularly is often a good idea. Going the original 10,000 mile intervals is too long. Ideally, you'll want to go only half that to prevent cam wear issues. Taking good care of these engines will make them more reliable. Another issue is the electro-hydraulic cam adjusters, which tend to go bad and make noise on cold starts. The bulletin issued for these cam adjusters covers every model year, so it's an ongoing issue. If you want to see more about the issues associated with the M156, I'd recommend watching Alex from a Legit Street Cars video on the problems with the M156. Another good channel I recommend is Tassos Moscatos, who has good videos showing what this wear looks like in M156 cars. So pretty much all of the more polished and reliable M156 engines went into the facelifted 2012 to 2015 C63s. All of the other cars in the Mercedes range went with the M157 5.5 V8 biturbo engine roughly around 2011, which only left the C63s around. These later M156 engines are generally better, but they still aren't perfect, as it was only really the head bolts that were solved. The other issues are generally still ongoing, but again, as I said before, maintenance is really key with the M156. Some may say that the failure rates are pretty low with the M156. It's just that there's quite a varied list of problems. But it is still less reliable compared to the previous M113K that came before it. Now, despite the flaws of the M156, AMG really did produce a perfected version of this engine. It was the M159. Based on the M156, AMG brought in the M159 in 2009 with the release of its SLS AMG supercar. With some extra development time, AMG was really able to perfect this engine with a significant overhaul from the M156. The M159 had over 120 components changed. Starting with the internals, AMG upgraded the M159 over the standard M156 to have reinforced crankshaft bearings and a more rigid engine block. The pistons on the M159 are forged units that were stronger and lighter than those in the standard M156 and are shared with the special C63s that I discussed earlier. The oil system was upgraded to a dry sump unit in the M159 to ensure proper lubrication under heavy use, and it lowered the center of gravity of the engine. The dry sump oil system features a 5-liter external reservoir, bringing the total oil capacity to 13.5 liters. That's up from the 8.5 liters of the standard M156. The magnesium intake system was upgraded in the M159 with velocity stacks to optimize airflow. The exhaust manifolds on the M159 also flowed better than those of the M156. Additionally, the M159 featured an anti-friction coating on its valve lifter buckets. The result was a power increase to 563 horsepower in the 2009 SLS AMG. The M159 was also immune to many of the problems I discussed earlier with the M156 engine. The better oiling system and anti-wear materials really helped the M159. The highest iteration of the M159 was in the SLS Black Series with 622 horsepower. The Black Series featured an increased engine redline from 7,200 RPM to 8,000 RPM. This included a fully revised high-speed valve train with modified camshafts, adjusted cam geometry, and optimized bucket tappets, which featured a full low-friction coating. The further measures carried out for the Black Series included modified oil bores in the crankshaft, new crankshaft bearings, an upgraded oil pump, and high-strength screwed connections for the connecting rods. The M159 in the Black Series will likely remain the most powerful naturally aspirated V8 engine ever in a production road car. The M159's racing history is still living on, as it has been a racing workhorse for AMG. It was used in the SLS GT3 race car. Additionally, it is currently used in the 2020 AMG GT3. AMG actually ditches the 4-liter M178 biturbo engine for the good old M159 in this car. Thus, the M159 and the M156 are truly racing engines developed from AMG. Despite all of AMG's effort to create an efficient, naturally aspirated engine, emissions requirements ultimately killed off engines like this for road cars. It's really a shame that the cylinder heads in early M156 cars had so many different issues. However, not every single engine was affected with problems. But at the end of the day, the things that AMG did right with the M156 make it one of the greatest V8 engines of all time. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more.